You're listening to In the Balance, the Iowa Judicial Branch podcast. Welcome to In the Balance, a podcast dedicated to exploring Iowa's judicial system. I'm your host, Avas Shrestha. In this episode, our guest will share valuable advice for new attorneys, drawing on the decades of experience both as a practicing attorney and on the bench. Today, we're speaking with retired Iowa Supreme Court Justice Bruce Zager. He served on the Iowa Supreme Court for 7 years and as a district judge in Black Hawk County for 12 years. He also has 18 years of experience in private practice before being appointed to the bench. Welcome to In the Balance, Justice Zager.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for talking to me. We want to know a lot about attorney side, and you have many years of experience from both attorneys, being an attorney, as well as being from the bench. Before we begin, I want to know a little bit of history of your education and your private practice, if you could share that.
Sure. I graduated from the University of Iowa with a Bachelor of Business Administration degree in primarily in human resources, or back then they used to call it personnel and industrial relations. Then I went and obtained a Master of Science degree from Loyola University of Chicago, also in industrial relations, is what they referred to it. Now I think they probably refer to it as human resources. Then I worked in private industry then for about a year and a half before I decided to come back to Drake Law School, and I entered into the conditional program there and was in fact did well during the summer conditional program, and then continued. And then because of well, at that time I had a wife and two kids, and then our third daughter was, or our second daughter was born while I was in my second year of law school. I wanted to get out early, so I did graduate early from at mid-year from Drake University Law School. I then went up to Cedar Falls and worked for a small 3 or 4 person. I was the fourth person law firm in Cedar Falls in just a private practice. And then I worked for about 2 years with another attorney in a partnership. And then I decided I wanted to go out on my own. And so then the last, roughly 8 years, 10 years, I can't remember, whatever, but then I was a sole practitioner up there. And then likewise, the last 13 years or so, I was a part-time county attorney, first assigned to the juvenile division, and then later on assigned to the civil division, where I spent the bulk of my time with the county attorney's office in Black Hawk County. So that's
awesome.
kind of my history before being appointed to the bench.
And beginning with that, how did your work as a private practice attorney prepare you for the bench?
Being in private practice, once you pass the bar exam, that's really when I think your education starts. And so I think, and it'll depend, of course, on what you're doing as part of a new attorney. When I went back to Waterloo, Cedar Falls area, which was my wife's and my hometown, I wanted to just get into more of a bread and butter practice, I call it. I mean, it's a small, more of a town practice. If you're in a large firm, such as in Des Moines, or it's kind of a different experience. I'll just kind of share what my experience was, which is, I think it prepares you in that in a small environment like that, you need to make sure that you reach out to people. It means you need to have a good mentor, and whether that's 1 or 2 attorneys within your firm. I think if you were in a large firm, which my daughter is here in Des Moines, they're going to provide you with mentors, and they're going to be your partners. But even if you don't have that particular person that you're assigned to, or that is meant to mentor you, you need to go search for those people. And if you don't get it within your own firm, or if you go out on your own, or whatever the case might be after law school, you need to go out and find those people that can help you. One thing that you mentioned earlier, I think, before we started the podcast, is go through and just take an hour or two and read the Code of Ethics for lawyers. And, that'll still provide you with a lot of good solid foundation there
Hmm.
because, as I'll say later on, I think in the podcast, everybody wants you to succeed. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone wants you to do that. And so, I did have a number of mentors in the private practice that I relied upon heavily to kind of guide me. You have to develop your people skills. I mean, if you're working in a big firm with limited clients, you don't necessarily have to develop those
Yeah.
same types of things, perhaps, that you have to if you're working in a small firm or by yourself. Kind of one of my mantras too is don't be afraid to, ask for help with people, including judges, and don't be afraid to branch out and reach out into other areas that you may not think you want to do. The beauty of to me, the beauty of a law degree is that it opens up a multitude of doors. And I have several examples in my own career where uh, I really didn't have any interest in uh, doing juvenile law, okay?
Hmm.
But that was an opportunity that presented itself, and at my time in my career, I felt I needed to make some adjustments.
That's
One
right.
more example, somebody asked me, they said, hey, I was doing a lot of dissolution work at that time. They said, hey, well, we've got a grant from the Iowa State Bar Association under the IOLTA grant that represented low income people in domestic relations matters. And, you think you're a good, successful attorney. I don't necessarily want to do that. Uh, but they say, well, just give it 3 months, give it 6 months. And, you can't force you to keep doing it if you don't want to do it. Well, it was a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful experience. I know other questions that you had maybe focused on pro bono. Well, this is a form of pro bono work. You're representing low income people in domestic relations matters, which I did for then 12 or 13 years before I went on the bench. And
Hmm.
it was a wonderful, positive experience, helped hone my skills as a domestic relations attorney. And but I think you need to be kind of a sponge and take advantage of all of these opportunities that might present themselves to you. And don't be afraid to ask for help and questions and that. And I think you'll be fine.
This is so fascinating because I'm not a lawyer, and all of your suggestions for new attorneys, what to do, really fits so perfectly, even as not being a lawyer for me or anybody else. Don't be shy to talk, don't be shy to ask for help, and
Right.
put yourself in something different position to learn perspective. And it's always the uncomfortable place that you get to learn more.
Right. That's right. And I think it's no, they don't always work out, but in my cases, those are just the examples that it wasn't something that I had planned, but it was just invaluable, as
Yeah,
far as expanding my reach or my experiences. And I definitely believe that if an attorney has the aspirations to be the judge, or in the judicial branch, these are the kinds of things that people look at. I mean, they look at the breadth of your experiences, certainly your people skills, uh, your ability to treat people respectfully, and all this comes out, through your practice
definitely.
that may get you then to that position as a judge, I believe.
Anything you do in the personal level, being nice to people, talking nice, everything counts in the professional world as well, every single detail. And when you're like navigating through the court system, and I guess for the new attorneys, going through the mental challenge of understanding the court system and going through the cases, some winning, maybe some losing, what kind of toll does it take for attorney to be relentless on pursuing the career they chose path to, and how difficult is it for new attorneys in your experience?
Of course, it's difficult, but people say I use cliches too much, but anything that, you have to work for, ultimately ends up being worthwhile. I think when it comes to, the stress, number one, you're not going to be right 100% of the time. So you can't really take it personally, either as an attorney, or I guess I'm going to speak more about the attorney. So if you lose in a court case, you can't be right all the time. And it's just, you cannot take it so personally, because some people's personalities are just that way. They take everything so personally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the same way. I'm sure I was. When I lost the case, then you want to blame the judicial system, or you want to blame somebody else. Or a classic example is the client wants to blame you as the attorney, that you didn't do a good job. And sometimes that could be the case. It could be true that you didn't, maybe you weren't up as much as you should, which teaches you for the next time. I maybe wasn't as prepared as I should have been for that. Internally, you have to look at that and say, yeah, could I have done better, and should I have done better for the client? You certainly never want to internalize it too much, but that's part of the growing experience too, is you just cannot take it so personally. I would hope
Mm-hmm.
that they would understand that, you have to have this downtime as well. You just can't be devoting all of it to the firm, so to speak, in that case. Even if you're a sole practitioner out there, you've got the same types of pressure, but you still have to take a step back and, take care of yourself. What we see, of course, with a lot of young attorneys is, uh, ethical violations when they're not doing what they're supposed to do, whether it's with
Mm-hmm.
trust accounts or handling of funds for clients or whatever the case might be. You've got to go back to those, but if you've got your rent to pay, if you got these to pay, the temptation is always going to be there. But again, it's easy to say this from an older gentleman like myself, but when you're there, you have to constantly go back and say, is this going to affect my license? You can't do anything that's going to affect your livelihood, which includes your law license. And so you never want to do anything that's going to jeopardize, you know, your career, your livelihood, your law license, which we all have worked so hard to obtain. Some people can't understand when I retired at 65 or 66 and doing this for being a judge for basically 20 years at that point. I could have continued till basically now, and I'm 72. But there is a mental toll that goes along with that, and you have to recognize that and do what's right for you.
We talked about working for your own self and managing your work-life balance. And now, what about working for somebody else, say for free and pro bono? What kind of ethical responsibility or duty do an attorney have in taking those kind of work?
We all understand, well, what a dire need there is for pro bono services for people.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's another example where you could develop an expertise. Most people don't go into the law to say, I want to do landlord tenant work either, which may be a lot of what the legal aid pro bono type of work would be. A lot of people don't want to do the IOLTA like I did, but with the representing low income people in domestic relations matters either,
Mhm.
because they're not interested in doing people's divorces and separations and child support calculations and things. But these are all very, very important things that need to be there. And we see that also with, and I know it's not pro bono, but, court appointed attorneys in criminal matters. I mean, they just have such a dire need for those people as well. So I think it's just extremely important.
Throughout the years of experience in the private side of your career, how fulfilling did you find those opportunities?
I thought it was just extremely fulfilling. I loved I can't say I loved every part, but I loved almost every part of it. Again, being in a full practitioner, you know, I had, uh, I had the IOLTA grant, which did provide me with that pro bono outlet. I also had the county attorney's work, which was just really, really enjoyable. And the person specifically that I
Hmm.
reported to in the county attorney's office, like I said, was my primary mentor throughout my career. And then just the fact of, you know, the client contact. I mean, that's what really fulfilled me is, having long-term clients and, seeing them through, everything that happens, whether it's buying a house, whether it's, writing their wills, unfortunately probating somebody's estate. But that to me is, the most fulfilling part of the private practice.
And reflecting on your journey, what do you wish you had known as a new attorney that only became clear after you became a judge?
Uh, I think it all goes back to making sure that you put yourself out there, that you're prepared, that you treat everybody with respect, whether you're a judge or whether you're an attorney. And I guess like I said, I still have struggled with that exact question. All
Or,
these things that I mentioned earlier
yep.
are, the mentoring, the asking for help from whether it's a judge, whether it's another attorney. I still go back to the point of I wish I would have been less afraid to go ask for help. But again, maybe it's just me, but you don't want to appear stupid or you don't want to appear as a lesser attorney by asking somebody else for help. And it probably took me until I was a sole practitioner when I really, really felt like I needed somebody. And I said, well, and maybe I'd ask somebody else and they'd say, well, I'll give an example. Leroy Redfern was an attorney in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and he, along with other members of the legal profession at that time, he wrote the Iowa title standards. He was a guru when it came to title standards, and I had a question about that. Oh my gosh, I agonized. And I was not necessarily a young person at this time. I mean,
Yep.
who knows how much 35, 40-year-old attorney that has been practicing for 10 or 12 years, but I still was anxious about calling him up. And my gosh, he was just the most cordial, helpful person, got right to the issue, told me where I should look for this and how I should do this, in passing, then said, if you ever have any more questions, don't hesitate to give me a call. Just give me a call. Well, the whole weight comes off, and I didn't never abused that privilege. The same thing with other people. I've had two or three other examples, and I have gone to talk to judges as well. And so I wish, I guess if I had to come up with one, those would be it, is not be afraid to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers. You hate to do that in front of your clients and say, oh, I just don't know. But that would be something that I would continue to try to tell people is go to the expert, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to want to help you. And if there's something that you think was amiss in a court hearing that you had, or that I should have done better. But once it's all over, of course, you can go talk to judges. I think most judges are very, very approachable and would be more than happy to help a young lawyer.
And by the suggestion you're making, I'm guessing you were open to attorneys asking you questions as well and
Absolutely,
asking for help.
absolutely. And all the good attorneys, they want to know how can I be better, or how do you think I could have been more persuasive on the matter? But that also shows you there are attorneys who are wanting to learn and willing to reach out to a judge. I'm also afraid that EDMS and things like that you just don't have those opportunities anymore.
Yeah.
And so that goes back to something that I wish I would have known too, which is I wish, going back, everything's worked out fine for me, but I'm saying if I had it to do over again, I would have involved myself. And I think it's more critical now to do that. I would have involved myself more in the local bar associations, the state bar association, young lawyers division. Get yourself into a network of people. I mean, no, you may not see them more than once or twice a year when you have a meeting, but this woman attorney in Cedar Rapids who does maybe similar type of work that you do,
Mm.
or a gentleman that practices in Sioux City, and you're in a small town in central Iowa somewhere. But it just expands, your scope of peers. I wish I would have done that.
That's such a great suggestion. And if I have to ask one last question, could you suggest anything that could you suggest something that a young attorney could learn that's not taught in school from your experience being on both sides of the bench?
Oh, man, that's kind of a tough one too, but it's not really a cliche, but it's kind of a truism for me. And it goes back to our original point about not taking things too seriously.
Mm.
And that would be that attorneys, you got to remember what your role is on all this, whether you're going to the bench or in private practice, which is, and again, my mentor taught me this because I'd get kind of upset. I'd say, well, I'm telling this board or commission what they should do and how they ought to do it and all that. And he always said, okay, you're the attorney, okay? Attorneys give advice, clients make decisions. And so they always have the ultimate say about what happens here. And I've used that, literally hundreds of times on things. And so, those are things that I think attorneys, you know, they're sort of truisms, as I call them, that I think can help guide you, whether, you're an attorney, whether you're on the bench, whatever the case might be. And so those are about the only ones I can come up with.
Thank you so much, Justice Jagat. This was really insightful information, and I got to learn a lot of perspective from attorney's side.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
And thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next month with another informative topic. Until then, thank you for listening to In the Balance.